Hathaway, the character that Hemsworth is playing, is a S-tier global hacker who is incarcerated for what was the specific thing that he was
banking?
He ripped off a bank.
Well, he was initially incarcerated for getting into a fight, and then he became a hacker, and then he got nailed for
I think he was already kind of a hacker. He said he went to jail for the Con Air, fighting.
He of course looks like Chris Hemsworth and Thor, and kind of maybe especially Thorish in this. It feels like this feels like he came right off the set of an Avengers film. He's huge, a gigantic man in this, and very, very clearly physically adept. Hemsworth is he's not like called on to do a lot of hand-to-hand combat, but he definitely looks like he could kick the shit out of a lot of people. He has that bearing. Some movie stars are not like that. Not Hemsworth. Hemsworth looks like he could kick your ass. And he's really, really smart. One of the best in the world, Nick Hathaway. And I think Chris Hemsworth is ruinously miscast.
One other thing is he has the most perfect hair ever.
Right.
Amazing
I was watching this with my...
He's stunningly handsome, of course.
Yeah. No, I was watching this with my wife, and she was just... His hair is, like, perfect the whole movie. Just scarily perfect.
Yes, that is the thing. It's not just that he's so big and ripped. It's also that he is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what becomes too much for people. I mean, look, it's not an easy character to start with because on paper, even before you get to the looks, this is like I said, god tier hacker who's also like really physically adept and can kick your ass and quick on his feet and street smart as well as computer code smart. And it's very just sort of a Mary Sue-ish figure. That's a difficult role to cast. You do need a movie star for that. I think they got the wrong movie star, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I like Hemsworth. I am pro Hemsworth, actually. I just think there's like a confluence of things about this role that make him uniquely bad for it. And it would probably work with like a Jesse Eisenberg guy. And I think the character has to be not great at everything. And so a lot of the problem here is the writing of the role. He needs to be a little out of his comfort zone. Okay, for example, Viola Davis and Holt McElhaney are not obvious choices to play cops, but they feel like real world cops in the context of this movie. I guess Holt's kind of an obvious cop, but they're not movie star types. They could be real cops, and they come across quite effectively in this movie as real cops. Hemsworth does not come across as real life hacker genius superhero, which, I guess is a writing problem as well.
Yep. But at the same time, and I work in software, and I've met, I have worked with people like Nick Hathaway. I have known, there was a guy there that I'm going to guess is like 6'5", 6'6". He was one of our top developers. And this guy, I can't remember if it was Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu this guy did, but he had been doing it for years. He competed in it. He was actually an instructor here in Minnesota. Really, really nice guy. This was a guy that not just trained on this stuff, but he could, he was just big. Was he as handsome as Chris? No, but I did work with other developers that were male model gorgeous, there are developers out there that look like Chris Hemsworth and can absolutely tear you apart in terms of fighting, So for me, wasn't that big of a leap, but at the same time, he is posited as this god level hacker that strains credulity a little bit, but yeah, he's kind of without any flaws. I think is kind of a problem.
Yes, he's without flaws, but he could be still a tough guy and good fighter if he was just a smaller figure. If he wasn't towering over everybody else in the scene at all points, he would feel like more of an underdog maybe at some point. And that he was using all of these incredible skills to overcome great odds. And here it's kind of like, well, fuck it. Of course, anything you put in front of Thor is going to be swept aside. Like, look at him.
I think that would have really helped the character if he was less just an intuitive genius at killing people. I mean, I'm okay with him being handsome and in good shape and being a genius hacker and, having this incredible resume. That's all things that the character has to be. I think it does not help the film at all for him to be also excellent, like really good at handling himself in a fight. I mean, I think if this
the idea is that
occasionally
he's been in prison for several years. He refers to it as Gladiator Academy, which is a specific phrase that we've heard in Michael Mann movies before. It's one of those recycled Mad Lib things, but that's the concept of the character. And again, I think you can have that.
I think that's
with a character that's 5'9" as opposed to 6'4", and just doesn't
maybe
visually look like
but
that.
You put him up against the Black Hat at the end. You put him up against the middle-aged chubby guy who is the villain of this film in a mano fight, and you're just like, okay, fine. Let's see how this guy does against Chris Hemsworth, and he does as you would expect, essentially. There's no tension to the ending because you're just like, well, will Chris Hemsworth win this fight? Yeah, he will. It's gonna be-
This is one of the hard ones to defend. And there's a certain type of thing where it's like, I feel like they're hard to defend because they're flawed, genuinely flawed. And yet the thing people pick on them for, I think, is like an unfair thing. They're not like focusing on the real flaw. They're focusing on this kind of bullshit complaint. And in this case, it is there. I think there's a lot of people, especially even more so in 2015, hung up on the idea that to be a god tier hacker meant you had to be, a basement dwelling neckbeard, and you couldn't possibly be a big handsome guy, and these things. And like Matt's saying, that's not because that's real life. That's just because the stereotype is really ingrained in Hollywood. And so people ding this for being Hollywood bullshit because it's Thor as a hacker. But actually, what they're digging for is not adhering to the previously established Hollywood bullshit.
Agreed.
And that is unfair, but also it is a problem that it's Thor. Because I can buy, for the purposes of this movie, a hero who is a brilliant hacker and strong and handsome and a great fighter. But Hemsworth is not just like in shape or just handsome. He's literally Thor. And we were an actual Norse god. Like, it puts you in this realm beyond like typical action movie stuff, because we could, watching a movie about.
He's a Schwarzenegger type build. Honestly, he's gigantic.
Right. No, it's definitely Schwarzenegger territory, because there's an agreement. We're watching movies about bankers or sports agents or whatever, and we accept that okay, this one looks like Tom Cruise, whatever. Like, we just kind of go with that. But in Schwarzenegger territory, it becomes impossible for that person to be inconspicuous. And there's several times in this movie when he needs to be inconspicuous. And for a movie that's set in like the quote unquote real world, as much as this movie is otherwise, it feels like every scene that he walks into should stop dead in his tracks while everyone looks at him and goes, Jesus Christ, is this guy for real? Like, you guys seeing this guy? Like,
yeah.
I mean,
he wouldn't
that's
blend.
Actually something that Hemsworth, that is something that Hemsworth plays in his career a lot, actually. More than Arnold even, is playing a uniquely strange person, just physically. Like, there's probably half a dozen movies where Schwarzenegger plays like a guy named Howard Anderson who lives in the Midwest, and he's a
Exactly.
banker, and no one, no one talks about the time he spends at the gym or his accent, But yeah, Hemsworth actually often is just like, whoa, look at that fucking guy. And not least for Thor. It's why he's a good Thor. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's right after BLACKHAT, he starts playing into that more, and he's great at it. And I am pro Hemsworth. I want to make that clear. This is at a time when he thought he had to like row against that, paddle upstream. And it may be the thing that convinced him he doesn't. And he's actually great when he doesn't, and he works with it, and the writing works with it.
Hemsworth, especially with the build that he had in this movie and his perfect hair, would walk into a room and the clock would even stop and go, okay, who's this Adonis that just walked in here? Because
he's actually not bad in the film. There's the thing.
I agree.
No, I think he's actually pretty good.
Yeah. I don't think this is one of those triumphing over miscasting things that you've talked about, Al.
No, it doesn't rise to that level.
But he's fine in it, He's a movie star, He's got that on lock. So, he pulls off the action scenes convincingly, maybe even a little too convincing for this character.
Exactly.
But, he's Chris Hemsworth. I like Chris Hemsworth. So, he's fine.
Right.
I think one other issue here, though, is not just that he's too ripped to be a hacker, but I think he's also just a touch too young to be this like hardened man's man. I mean, Michael Mann's archetype, which is a sort of, well, it's a middle-aged guy who kind of knows exactly what they're about and what they want out of life, and is, kind of jaded with society and all that. And he's a little too young and youthful looking to carry that off, which just underlays all this other stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, he feels a little less like a man protagonist than, a lot of the others have, even though there is sort of like a lot of like Neil McCauley in there sort of undergirding it, but it just still he's just too much Hemsworth.